Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of the Buddy Study Group. And today we're going to be doing some long-term care case prep 101. I think this is a piece that I can teach you guys a little bit about and just like what tools we have available to help you prepare for a case and just again from a mindset perspective how to prepare. But I would love to also hear from you guys what tips and tricks that you have that the audience can learn from when it comes to preparing for a case. Now, I'm not talking about the information gathering portion of working with a prospect. That is really assuming that that case prep has been done. And again, I want to give a shout out to Linda Thalheimer and her website because I think her long-term care questionnaire really, really helps to cut straight to it. So again, if you want to look at this for inspiration, if you want to copy any of the questions, you already have Linda's blessing to do so. But longlifeplanning.com, LTC questionnaire, and if you click on this button, it will take you to her HIPAA compliant form to fill out. Now you don't have to fill it out. Obviously, I would just go through the questions for inspiration's sake. But Linda asks so many questions up front on that form, and it is such a good thing to ask these questions that it allows her to cut straight to case preparation. Um, and we're not just talking about what's your name and date of birth and what state do you live in, but we're talking health information. We're also talking financial fact finding, but we're also even from there talking about preference, right? So there are some questions. How would you pay this premium if this is something you want to move forward with? Um, what kind of product do you prefer? Something with guarantees or something with max efficiency, with life insurance, without life insurance? I think again, what we're talking about today is assuming you've taken in all of that information, and you may not be the type of person who wants to take in all of that information up front. Of course, everybody has a different process. Some folks thought this may be too many questions for a client to answer up front, but they're gonna have to be answered at some point in the process, right? So, what we'll talk about today is assuming that you've gone through at least your initial fact finding. So if you haven't done some of that upfront questioning about preferences, I think this is the time to do so. We got to have the biographical information. We got to have the health information. We got to have some of the financial information, including do you have any existing annuities? What kind of savings are we working with? What other assets do we have to be able to plan with? And a lot of this, I think, when people go through it, they're really characterizing this. These are questions I have to ask you. Regulators are going to require me to make sure that you are in a financial state to even be suitable for long-term care insurance. So it's part of your due diligence. So what we're really talking about is what you do with the information you take in, and that's really where I think a lot of our tools will help with your case prep. So I want to do a little bit of sharing of the buddy system to give you all an idea of how these tools help. I think everybody has a different way of running things once they get that initial information. And you could be an individual long-term care specialist, an independent long-term care specialist, or you could be, a BGA. You could be sales support for a BGA. So I understand that this process is very different, but I think our tools also help fit a lot of different backgrounds. I think if you're more of a BGA, you're working on behalf of a broker. I think those brokers need to be educated on how to conduct that conversation. There was one thing I noticed at my former BGA. We were working with a lot of financial planners, a lot of wealth managers who really didn't have an idea of how the long-term care conversation differed from what they were doing every day in securities, right? So I think there's education you need to do if you're working on behalf of others. I've done a lot of talks about why it's important to work with financial planners. I think this goes just as well in that arena. So, the first tool I want to get in front of you guys, if you haven't seen it in a while, is our Product Buddy tool. What this is designed to do is take some of that initial information and go from, we are trying to find out a little bit more about you to we're trying to figure out what you're a fit for, right? At the end of the day, I think that's the most important thing is assessing the product fit and really making realistic recommendations. Okay. So what you can do here is you can put in an age, you can put in state, and this is why it's important to kind of have this homework done ahead of time. Health information is going to play a part in what they can qualify in, right? So we have some explanations for health assessment categories. I know it's really hard to take a complicated, nuanced health background and kind of condense that into one word, but this will serve as a guide. So if we're talking excellent health, we're talking a virtually spotless health history. There's no significant comorbids. There's a healthy build there. No tobacco use and prescription drug use has got to be pretty darn minor or for minor conditions. Average is going to kind of be your standard rate. There may be some health conditions, but they're not completely compromising. They're not as risky to an underwriter. There could be some prescription drugs for blood pressure, things of that nature. But again, nothing major. Height and weight is still going to be within that healthy build range. And then we go down to substandard. There could be, um, some medical questions that are a concern for some carriers. Poor is, essentially we are looking to see if we can get covered, not necessarily how many carriers are going to be able to cover us, right? So very few clients that you have will likely end up there, but let's just do something like an average. And preferred funding is another piece. So I think this is an important question to ask before you start doing case prep with this tool. Number one, your financial fact finding will give you an idea. Does this person have the capacity to make a single premium or to do a 10 pay? Or after looking at their finances and other financial vehicles they may have out there, are we kind of needing to be on a pay as you go sort of model? So I'll leave it at any just to show max options. And then what Product Buddy will do is it will filter out product types that this client likely wouldn't qualify for or based on age or state definitely would not qualify for. And we'll kind of try to rank these options. So we have hybrid, life, long-term care, and then we have traditional long-term care. And again, what this does is helps make you efficient, right? You're searching for the right fits as part of your case prep, right? Clients may come in with certain wishes. Hey, I heard about this XYZ product. Can you show me a little bit about that? But I think at the end of the day, they are looking to be guided. So this will give you some of the shortcuts, I guess, or some of the efficient routes to finding those fits a bit more quickly. So I would tab through these solutions. You can see what carriers will consider them based on age, state, and a generalized health assessment. And this starts to get you some answers. But what it also does is help start build up your library of sales materials, right? So you'll come away with a one pager that will give you kind of the ideal candidates for the product. It'll give you why people are normally looking at these products, why people are purchasing these products. So as you tab through the product types, you'll get a different one pager for each product type. So we could look at older ages and we may have other options come up, right? Once we get into age 60, we'll have this for short-term care, we'll have this for annuity long-term care, right? So I would start prepping sales materials, and this is not necessarily something you need to go over step by step with the client, but this is a very good leave behind. I think a lot of folks like to use other diagrams to show how products work. Um, they have their way of running through it, be it just kind of explaining the product in words or whatever they've kind of come across that they deem effective. This is not meant to uproot your process. It's meant to make your process a little bit quicker from a product selection standpoint and from a leave behind education standpoint, because you can leave these behind and say, remember we talked about traditional long-term care and hybrid life and long-term care on our call today. Here's just some refresher pieces that you can take to review some of the important pieces to each of these products. So that's one of the things that's kind of a big piece of case prep is what is my range of options? It's not necessarily at this moment what is the best option. I think that is oftentimes done in the presentation and for the client to decide. Some clients will defer and say, I want to go with your number one recommendation as long as you can kind of explain why. And other clients want to be more of a driver, right? They want to actually decide what the best option is for them. I've always kind of taken that approach. I'm going to give you, um, you know, some of the maybe top 2 to 4 recommendations that I have, and I want you to really feel comfortable selecting your own plan. If I've made recommendations to you, this is largely under the premise that you can't really miss, right? On these options, you're going to come away with a good option one way or another. Um, but there are some items that are up to preference, and that's why I want to take you through a few options. So that first step, filter out the noise that you don't need. Filter out the carriers that we're not going to qualify for. That's really the main purpose of this tool's execution, right? But once we do that, from a pure availability, is it available to me? Is it not? We have to go deeper, right? And we go deeper by really understanding, okay, here's what our biographical information and maybe some information about our wealth can be available to us, but then we have to take the step of going, what can our health buy us, right? So once we kind of jot down a few finalists from Product Buddy, because we see the carrier recommendations here, I recommend going to our sales guides. So this will do a couple of things for you. This will take you through each of the products that Product Buddy could recommend for you, and it'll give you deeper dive information. We'll go a little bit more into that later. But up here, we have the Underwriting Buddy document. And this is one of our old babies, but I think the primary reason to go here is to get some of the information that you can quickly get on hand, or to get a line built between you and an underwriting team to see if your client will be able to qualify from a health basis. You can do this even ahead of your next face-to-face meeting with the client. So let's say you're a Linda and you're getting all of this information already. You take that information and whatever carrier finalist you found in Product Buddy, we have the pre-qual emails here so that you can reach out to that carrier. Now, I will say short-term care carriers generally don't have a process for pre-qualification necessarily. Annuity long-term care carriers may have a little bit more of an underwriting desk to be able to advise. But at the end of the day, if you're dealing with those two types of products, there's also in the alternative products section knockout questions and uninsurable drug lists. This is a good shortcut if you don't want to wait back to hear from an underwriter. You don't have the capacity to hear from an underwriter. You can take a look at the knockout questions and all of that health information that you've already taken in. You can run that through the knockout questions and you can get an idea of, is my client going to get through these questions, right? So it's an easier process to understand if we have the ability to qualify for these simplified issue products or not, because it's kind of black or white. It's yes or no. Um, Depending on what product you're using on the annuity side, I mean, we have Equitrust Bridge that's guaranteed issue, but we also have things like Forecare. Forecare has underwriting questions here, and these questions will determine, do you have a chance of getting approved? So if you can answer no to all these, you'll be approved. But then there's underwriting for, do I get 2 times or 3 times leverage for long-term care? So it's a good exercise to go through that too, because that may change the weight of this product in your decision making. So I think between the pre-qualification and the alternative product section showing the knockout questions, I also think build charts can be very, very helpful. If you have a build chart for that carrier listed here, checking that out with the height and weight, sometimes that precludes somebody right out of the gate. So that's an important thing to look at. But also, many carriers have uninsurable conditions guides, uninsurable medications, uninsurable condition combinations can be tricky. So I always recommend pre-qualifying with an underwriter, but there are some answers you can get again to keep things efficient ahead of time. If you think something is a danger of a knockout from a build perspective, from a medication perspective, from a condition perspective, we have resources here to help you get that answer quickly so that you're not spending as much time waiting to hear back from an underwriter on some of these things. But these underwriting teams are generally within a business day reply as long as you have that information presented in an easy way for them to read from and make a determination, that should be fine. But this is an essential piece. Again, it's all about avoiding the exposure of showing somebody something they can't get. Like Linda's say yes to the dress example. You know, she used it in budget, right? We don't want to show something that's over budget that somebody falls in love with, and when they can't get it, all the other options just kind of seem meaningless to them. But also from a health perspective, we don't want to show somebody a product that they fall in love with before we have an idea if they'll qualify from a health standpoint, and really just kind of sour them on the process because the dress they really loved is sitting up there on the shelf, even when they're looking at all these other dresses, and they still want to look back at that one dress that they felt they couldn't do without. So, Underwriting Buddy is really going to help you from a case preparation standpoint there. So, that's in the individual section. Underwriting Buddy document is here. But you may also have something like a comments section on your form. You know, please provide me any other information that will help me look for the best option for you. And a lot of people make mention or, answer a question on an intake form. Hey, I plan to retire overseas. I don't plan to retire in the US. Phil Shelton helped us by putting together this international benefits PDF. And by carrier, this actually explains how international benefits work for each of these products. So this is a good thing to go through. And if you have some finalists and a client mentions that they want to retire overseas, this is a chief desire of your client or prospect. So they're going to make their decision based on this. So if you don't see your carrier here, that's likely a problem. If you do, or if multiple of the carriers you're looking at are here, it's good to read into these to get a full understanding of what benefits are going to be covered internationally, what coverage they're going to have internationally. Okay, so I think at the end of the day, case prep is about showing the strength of our listening and demonstrating that to the client by showing them options that they're really going to enjoy based on what they've told you about their plans. So that information gathering and case prep go hand in hand. Your case prep is going to inform your field underwriting, right? If I'm preparing for a case and a client has a very specific want or need, maybe I think about adding that to my intake form or adding that to the questions that I ask on my fact-finding meeting, right? If a client does a really good job with fact-finding or fills out my form with a lot of detail, that means I have a lot of case prep to do. But why you're doing this prep is to not overload the client. I think too many options is a bad thing, whether they want your recommendations or they want to choose. Obviously, we want to give the client some choices, but if we give them too many, they're going to hit a point where their brain is just going to shut down and it's going to be hard to reach them again because if they, you know, ghost you, whatever it may be, or if they all of a sudden start pulling away, in order to bring them back, they're going to be reminded of, oh, the last time I looked at this, there were like 10 billion options, and it felt like I was going for my PhD just to choose which long-term care product I want. So if we're going to be really effective as long-term care specialists, we got to get them at least a few options, and we've got to get them options that really track with what they told us their desires are, right? Simple as that. So, in our individual sales guides, um, you're going to get a lot of information about each carrier, but I think when you're doing your case prep, whether you plan to show it right away or not, you're going to want to quote, right? So each of these carrier sections has quote and apply instructions. So you'll want to check out the quoting resources and get yourself a quote. If you have Stratecision, you'll run some early comparisons based on how you've narrowed down the products from a health standpoint and using Product Buddy to kind of cut out some of that noise. Maybe you want to have a formal quote ready in case a client is over the moon. Yeah, I'm into NGL. I want to see something formal from NGL. You can have that in your back pocket. The more prepared you are, the less likely it's going to take a third, a fourth, a fifth call to get them closed. Again, even if you don't show it right away, if you have it in your back pocket, you can pull it out depending on where the conversation goes, right? So a good long-term care specialist is always prepared for their call. So I think formal quoting is a good way to go about that. There are also contracts and outlines of coverage. If you've got a client who's very analytical or had a personal experience with long-term care or with claims, you have this at your fingertips to be able to grab at a moment's notice. Or the agent portal itself will have state-specific ones. We generally just throw a specimen state in there. I think another piece to this is the quick quote tool is Benefit Buddy, and this requires case prep as well. So again, all of this depends on where the client is coming from. But I think most clients are going to want to know, all right, this is great. We've talked all these benefits, we've talked all this health, we've talked all this financials, and how much does it cost, buddy? Like, get to the point. I want to know how much this is going to cost me, and I want to know what I'm going to get out of it. I think this requires just as much case prep as anything else is showing the client the cost and the value and showing it in the right way. So with Quick Quote, if you want to just pull it out, this is a little bit easier and requires a little bit less case prep. We have traditional and hybrid long-term care in the quick quote tool. So we don't have things like short-term care, annuity, long-term care, things of that nature. But this is one you can pull out and do a really simple back of the napkin. sort of quote. So you can choose male or female, you can choose an age, you can choose traditional or hybrid, show a hypothetical claim age, and show a monthly benefit. Now, this is going to be for 3% compound for a 6 year benefit period. So you can give them an idea right away. Here's what a monthly premium would be. And again, we're not showing single premium or 10 pay, but that can set the stage for a client saying, is there a way I can just pay all this premium up at once? Is there a way I can just do a 10 pay and be done with this? Um, but at the end of the day, you'll show them their premium, you'll show them their total paid premiums to claim age, you'll show them their monthly benefit, their total long-term care, and you'll show them the leverage of this. They'll get an idea of what it may cost initially, and I would say start small, especially if you're just kind of whipping this tool out and you're not having a conversation ahead of time to fully establish a budget, right? Start small. You can always build up, and that won't result in shock, right? That's an important piece to this. But I think if you want to go even deeper and you want to show something that's more comprehensive, Benefit Buddy is the way to go. And with the full version of Benefit Buddy, we do have templates that help you set things up conceptually. So we do have Aetna short-term care. We do have Equitrust Bridge in here as templates. So you can take a look and just click the template and get an idea of their coverage based on or in the Benefit Buddy sort of ecosystem, right? Same deal. How much are we paying a month? What's our total paid premiums? Based on our hypothetical claim age, what kind of benefit are we going to have, and what's our total long-term care benefits? And we can even compare this to self-funding, right? So use the templates that will help you quickly set up kind of your storytelling mechanism to educate the client better. Equitrust Bridge, same deal. Shows the 100,000 single premium, shows the monthly benefit, shows the total long-term care benefit. And again, we're comparing that to self-funding. But you can also do some work to set Benefit Buddy up ahead of time. So when we're in here, we can create a new plan. And if you have a quote in mind, if you have an illustration in mind, you can work backwards from this using custom LTCi. Okay. So you can go custom LTCi versus self-funding. And as long as you have from the illustration what that annual premium is, how many years they're going to pay it, the pay mode, the monthly benefit at age 85, total long-term care at 85, and death benefit and cash value, if you'd like to show it at 85, if there's none, you can toggle it off. But then you can compare that to any of the other scenarios we have. You can compare it to NGL with the traditional long-term care. You can compare it to hybrid, self-funding, and the cost of care. And once you have this information set and you've kind of rehearsed on your own how you will go through this information with the client. And again, you're taking in all of this information and you're demonstrating your good listening, right? So if you have a client who's talking about self-funding, you're going to want to prepare yourself to tell that self-funding story with Benefit Buddy. And once you've got it set just how you like it, you can hit save and you can save this as your valued client. And you can say the plan name is custom LTCi versus self funding. And you can set whatever notes you need to do. And you can hit save and exit. And your plan is saved here. So you can, at the time of the meeting, we're prepared. We can pull this up. I just have something I want to show you. Here's the quote we were looking at versus taking that same exact premium and self-funding it in the market with a 5% rate of return and an assumed tax on gains percent of 20%. And you can be off to the races telling your story. So I've bounced around to a lot of different tools here. I have kind of shown you our sales guide and how to quote and apply. We went through Underwriting Buddy. We went through international benefits. You got an idea of the carrier pages where you can go in and get all this information. Benefit Buddy, using the templates. Product Buddy, filtering everything out that is not available to the client and prepping you with some sales materials. So we've done a lot of work over the years putting tools in place that makes the business of long-term care easier. That's kind of been our mantra since day one. And the rest from a process standpoint is up to you. You know, I can impart some wisdom on you. I can have top long-term care specialists come in and impart their wisdom, but that is just to pick up little pieces of inspiration along the way. And I think you need to develop your own process based on that inspiration that you feel comfortable with. But the overarching theme here is to make sure that you're putting yourself in a position where you have enough information and you've done enough good listening and the client's done enough good explaining about their situation and what they're looking to get out of long-term care planning so that this case prep is spent really thinking about what your client has said, right? This is where your thoughtfulness is executed, right? So I think this piece is universal. We're taking away, and even if it's, you have an initial meeting with the client and you get an idea. So just to confirm, your top three takeaways for this were you're planning to retire overseas, so we want to see a product with good international benefits. We want to see either a 10 pay or the ability to pay this plan up all in one shot. And we want to make sure we have inflation protection because you're on the younger side, and we want to make sure our plan's keeping up with the cost of care. That gives you almost everything you need as long as you still have their health information, their financial and biographical information to go and put something together that will really demonstrate to the client that you've listened. And I think that is the most important thing. If they feel heard, if they feel like you are helping them build a plan that they are designing, um, that is the most important piece about case prep. It's like writing an essay, right? Yeah, when you're writing an essay, you're creating a thesis statement. Here is what I am going to cover in this essay. And when you're presenting the product options to your client, it should be based on that thesis statement that they actually came up with, right? So my takeaways from the last meeting were this, and this. So these are three options that I came up with because they hit bullet point one, bullet point two, bullet point three, and they each hit them in varying ways. So let's go through and explain them, right? If you get yourself to that point with case prep, whether it's using our tools or it's using whatever other tools that you have at your disposal, I think that helps you not feel like you're scrambling on these calls. That makes you feel organized. And when you are organized, confidence comes from that. And when you have confidence and you can demonstrate that you're working within kind of the client's wishes and parameters, that's just going to help your success rate overall. So that's what I wanted to run through today as far as tools, as far as mindset for case prep. I wanted to see from you all out there if there were any tips and tricks that you use for your own individual case prep and see if there's something that everybody can learn from, or if there's a spot that you feel like you maybe get stuck. That would be a great opportunity to also speak up so that some folks can learn. Anybody have anything that they want to volunteer that they use for case prep? Anybody have any questions on the tools that I went over today that you have at your disposal with the buddy system? Well, I think we've got both rock stars and lunch and learners today. That's okay if we don't have anything that we want to volunteer. I'll just kind of sum things up again by saying being a good listener is at the heart of being a good salesperson. So we need to make sure that we're putting out the communication that lets the client know what we want to listen to, what we want to hear from them. And when we take in that information, we need to know exactly what to do with it, and we need to know how to be able to go find those answers for the client so that we can assemble them something that they're really happy with. At the end of the day, if you have a client who is very engaged with what you've shared and picking between a few carriers is actually a hard decision, I think you've done a good job because you've put together a number of options that check all the boxes. So I think case prep is like the most important part of the process outside of asking for the sale, um, and doing the good listening on the fact finding side of things. So we put a lot of tools together to help you do that and really to give you more time back. So the less time you spend doing the manual work of case prep, the better. And if our tools can help with that, great. And it still fits into your process, all the better. But that's really all I had to share. Didn't see much in the chat either. We were supposed to have Julie Udovich from Nationwide for today's call, but she had a conflict come up, so we're going to be rescheduling Julie, I think, over the next couple of weeks or so. So stay tuned for that. And we're going to work through a couple of more agent sessions and carrier sessions on products with the next few study groups. As always, if there's something that you would like to see for a topic, I've been circling around to some of my foundational presentations that we try to do once or twice a year. But if there are any recommendations that you guys have for topics you'd like to see, we're all ears as always. And we'll get you out a little bit early today. Not all these study groups have to be 45 to 60 minutes. So I appreciate you all being here. Be well, and we will talk to you next time. Have a good one.